Thank you everyone for joining us for our webinar today, Limit Risk, Reap Reward, the Case for Unconscious Bias Training. We've got a lot of great content to look forward to, so we're going to dive right into this. So our agenda for today, we're going to do some brief introductions. We're going to talk about the Multicultural Food Service and Hospitality Alliance. Gerry Fernandez is going to look at the state of the industry on diversity and inclusion and talk about the topic of unconscious bias, and then he's going to kick it over to Maggie Fiorentino to introduce Understanding Unconscious Bias, a new training from ServSafe Workplace. A few quick housekeeping reminders for this webinar. There is a Q&A box on your screen where you can type all of your questions in that box to be answered at the end of the presentation. You can use that box as well for any technical issues that you may have, whether it's with audio or connection or viewing the PowerPoint itself. You should note that this webinar is being recorded and a recording will be emailed to each of you tomorrow. So if you have technical issues or if you have to leave for any reason or you just want to share it with your team afterwards, you can do that once you receive your link. And there will be a quick survey at the end of the webinar, and we ask everyone to stick around to fill that survey out. This will help us improve our webinars, and it will also let us know if you would like to be contacted for more information. So today, I mentioned this webinar is being hosted by Gerry Fernandez, who's the founder and president of the Multicultural Food Service and Hospitality Alliance, and Maggie Fiorentino, who's a product manager with the National Restaurant Association. And I'll let each of them introduce themselves when it's their section. So now I'm going to kick it over to Gerry. Take it away.
Thank you, Dan. Let's get started. I want to start with a fact. Sometime between the year 2041 and 2046, the U.S. will become a majority-minority country. What are the implications of this change? For some, it might bring fear of the unknown, which leads people to make assumptions that lead us to bias. So our learning objectives for today are simply three: to recognize and understand that bias is normal and natural. If you have a brain, you have bias, and therefore unconscious bias as well. Secondly, that there is lots of cross-cultural, cross-racial, ethnic conflict occurring in the restaurant and lodging sector, as we're going to see, and many companies are not prepared for that conflict and what could come in the terms of, or in the means of viral incidents. So training is really necessary. And the good news is that with training, we can learn to move beyond our bias and make much better decisions. So as I get started in this brief overview, I have a disclaimer. Not everything that I say today will apply to every individual. That's important to note. Secondly, we use data, research, and so we have the backup information for all of the research or information we use in these slides. And third, we like to practice what we call straight talk. You can't make wine if you don't crush grapes. So we talk directly about some of the issues that challenge our industry so that we can be honest about what solutions are necessary. So a little bit about MFHA. We're an educational nonprofit. We've been around since 1996. This photograph here shows our first gathering at the at the Park Hyatt in Chicago. And we've been focused on, for 24 years, how to make the business case for diversity and inclusion and how to encourage more minority business development, encourage more people from underrepresented groups to be investors in our industry. We work with companies to develop strategy, educational content, and we share best practices in addition to hosting networking events where we share resources and give recognition for people doing a good job. So a little bit about me. I've been in the industry 43 years total, and I've been leading MFHA for 26 years. So I like to think I have a pretty good perspective on on how the industry is doing on issues of culture and inclusion. But I define myself as an operator, more of a restaurateur, even though I did spend some time working at the Waldorf in New York City many years ago. We also want you to be aware that companies from all across our industry, all across lodging, food manufacturing, distribution, restaurants, from quick service to fine dining, are all working on issues of inclusion. How do we create a workplace where everyone can thrive regardless of the package that God put them in? And today we're going to continue to focus on how bias and unconscious bias can sometimes get in the way of us giving people the opportunity to serve at their highest capability. We're really pleased that we were able to get launched while I was working at General Mills. So they're a founding company and couldn't be happier. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for the leadership of the National Restaurant Association. And we're really excited about this new solution that Maggie's going to tell you a little bit more about when I'm finished. So the state of our nation, the state of our America. I probably don't have to tell you that the country is extremely polarized. There are tensions in ways that many of us hadn't thought of since the 60s during the civil rights movement. And that's because America is changing. It's more diverse now than it's ever been, more multicultural, more millennial, more immigrants. The graying population is impacting our workforce. I don't know how many of you are like me. You have an elderly parent living with you. Creates lots of challenges in how we do our job and how we get things done. And so these changes, these demographic shifts are increasing customer expectation. And of course, labor shortages and skills gaps occur in ways that show up very quickly in lodging and food service outlets. I also would be remiss if I didn't talk about the fact that women are being heard. The Me Too movement has been birthed, and it came on the backs of women leaders in 1975 with the ERA, and then we had Anita Hill in the 90s where sexual harassment came up for the first time, and now we have the Time's Up movement. And this is extremely important for our industry because, unfortunately, restaurants are in the spotlight. We had a very highly profiled business in our industry who had a big cohort of women charged them with sexual harassment. And these are just a few samples. We've seen the celebrity chefs in the news, and BuzzFeed and the Harvard Business Review list the food service industry as the restaurant industry is the #1 for sexual harassment. And we need to do something about that. And the way we'll begin to combat that is with training like the unconscious bias, training that we're going to see here today. But it's important that everybody do their part. It's important because mistakes have consequences. When you get this wrong, when your company ends up on the wrong side of a social media event, it's bad for business. If you have to close the restaurant to do training, that's lost revenue. It costs money to create this training. You have to hire lawyers. There are all the issues of branding online where you don't want to be seen as the company that doesn't get it on women or doesn't get it on race. And so it's extremely important that people get out ahead of this, and that's what this is designed to do. Let's not forget about our hotel partners here, because there are plenty of events occurring in hotels. I have 3 examples here, West Coast, East Coast, and north of the border, where racial discrimination is in play. In this next slide, we see that it gets so far that someone actually asked an African-American woman to take a shower before she gets in the swimming pool. So these are really unusual examples, but lots of smaller, less inflammatory kinds of things are occurring in restaurants, hotels, food service outlets. And we as managers, as leaders, need to give people the tools that are necessary to head these things off at the pass, if you will. So I want to make the business case for change. We need to make change. We need to do better. We need to commit the resources to the kind of training that will make a difference. And that's because our industry is very diverse. This slide will illustrate that we have lots of women and people of color in our workforce. However, we don't see them advancing at the same rate as our white brothers and sisters. And we need to see them be as successful as they possibly can. What are some of the reasons they don't advance? Unconscious bias. People see this individual for that kind of job, but not for the other kind of job. And on the lodging side, the same is true. Very diverse. Lots of Hispanic, Latino, Asian, and other underrepresented groups. But the same kinds of things that are occurring there, where because bias, either conscious or unconscious, people can't see someone, this person should be at the front desk, not that person. That person should be in the back of the house. Those are the things that we have to give our employees the education, the training, and the tools to overcome. And this is so important because the population projections tell us with great clarity that the white population's growth is slowing, and the Hispanic, Asian, and Black population are growing. What are the implications there? That we need to ensure that the minority populations are achieving college education at the same level as the white population. We need leaders, no matter what color they are, no matter what package God put them in, no matter what their sexual orientation. We need people to be able to lead at their highest levels possible, because the data suggests we're going to have more diversity, not less. We're going to have more immigrants, not less. And we have to manage bias so that we can help people be the best that they can be. And what's the payoff? High employee engagement. This is Gallup data that indicates when you're highly engaged with your employees, when you're white, Black, Asian, biracial, LGBTQ, military, people with disabilities, when those employees feel like my boss, my manager, my owner, my hotel GM gets me, understands me, I'm way more committed to work for you. And absenteeism goes down, turnover goes down, shrinkage goes down, and productivity goes up. So there's a clear business case for doing this and doing it well. So let's get right into the content. Bias and unconscious bias. Bias is nothing more than shortcuts. Your brain taking shortcuts. We have our brains make assumptions about people all the time. There are 11 million bits of information coming to us at any given time, the science tells us. Now, the problem with that is your brain can only handle 10 to 12 consciously at one time. So therefore, it has to sift out the information that is not necessarily needed right now, and it gets pushed to your subconscious. It's an automatic response, a shortcut to interact with the world, basically a tendency to judge without question. It happens just like snapping your fingers. You can't control it. It's automatically what your brain does. And here's a very clear example. According to research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letters be at the right place. The rest can be a total mess. And you still can read it without problem. That's because the human mind does not even read the letter by itself, but the word as a whole. So I encourage you to take this slide and share it with others who think that bias or shortcuts don't exist, because they clearly do. Now, unconscious bias are those associations that occur without our awareness, intention, or control. And the challenge is they oftentimes are not consistent with what we say about ourselves. You know what that looks like. You meet someone for the first time, They remind you of somebody before, you've got a bad look on your face. That reminds me of John. John and I didn't get along way back when. Your brain makes those associations based upon your background, your experiences, and you have very little control over that. Now, the good news is that once you get in touch with bias and unconscious bias, once you can recognize it, you can do something about it. So for me, I have a bias against tattoos on people's neck. Don't really know why. Might have come out of my upbringing in a conservative household in New England. But I now am aware of that, and I tell my team. So when I interview someone who might have a tattoo on their neck, I'm conscious of it, and I force myself to push that to the side and focus on what he or she is saying and not on the tattoo. So you kind of catch yourself in this kind of thinking that causes you to have blind spots. So the characteristics of unconscious bias, it's like the iceberg. It's the stuff happening underneath the surface in your subconscious mind that you probably don't think a whole lot about. And as I said, they don't usually align with your declared beliefs. You might say, hey, I support women all the time. However, when you look at your interviewing process, all of the women that you've interviewed never seem to make it to the second level. There might be an unconscious bias at place or at work there. And this is what the training will help you examine that. As I said, the most important thing about unconscious bias is you can do something about it to interrupt it. You can't eliminate it, but you can do something to interrupt it. So here we have 3 examples of where bias frequently shows up. Height. 14% of the U.S. Male population is 6 foot or taller. What percentage of CEOs are 6 feet or taller? Well, seeing how you can't answer me here, I'll answer it for you. 60%. So why would 60% of CEOs be 6 foot or taller? Is it that the air up there is much better, they're smarter? No, it's because we have a perception over time that tall and strong are better leaders. Except for this doesn't apply when it comes to women. It's always different when it comes to women, unfortunately. The second bias is the names on a resume. There was a study done where first group of resumes sent out had names that were perceived to be black-sounding names. The second group had names that were perceived to be white-sounding names. One stack of resumes got 50% more callbacks. Which one do you think it was? Well, it was the white-sounding names. The same is true if it had a Muslim-sounding name or something that might be clearly ethnic. So we have name bias. And the last bias I'll mention before I move on is the bias associated with accent. The more someone's accent sounds like yours, the more you believe them. Unless, of course, you come from one particular part of the world where that accent trumps everyone. And that's the British accent. For reasons unbeknownst to me, the British accent is perceived to be smarter than everyone else. But this is a clear example here on this slide where height, name, and accent have nothing to do with a person being able to do the job, yet they come into play with how we treat guests in the hotel or in the restaurant. And so this training is designed to address that issue. So when making decisions about individuals, people, who you send up for promotion, who you send out for training, how you engage a guest who has a concern, ask yourself, are there any biases? Do I have blind spots? Is there something going on? Is this person making me think of something that happened, another time in my life? Do I have any automatic feelings? It's kind of like whenever you meet somebody and you say, I don't like that person, and you don't have a good reason, that's your bias kicking in. And so try to notice those patterns and catch yourself moving in a biased way. And then consciously share that with others on your team. And this is how you begin to make movement in the right direction. So that's all I have time for today. I'm going to pass off the leadership of the webinar to Maggie and have her tell you a little bit about this exciting new solution. Maggie?
Thanks, Gerry. So my name is Maggie Fiorentino, and I'm a product manager with National Restaurant Association. I manage various training and certification programs for National Restaurant Association and also the American Hotel and Lodging Educational Institute portfolio. I've worked at various companies to develop and launch e-learning programs and academic curricula. And before my role as a product manager or marketing manager, I was an educator for many years. So I want to talk just a little bit about the connection that we've had with MFHA. We have been fortunate to be able to work with MFHA in the development of the Understanding Unconscious Bias course. And what we found at our very beginning of our development, the conversations that we had, is that the teammates from MFHA would really let us know that, as the expert, that they know that they've had lots of conversations with folks in the industry. They've conducted workshops. Those workshops have been typically at the corporate level, higher management, C-suite. And what they are hearing a lot is that they're really excited about the content of the training, but they want to find a way to try to carry that out through to the establishment at the unit level. How can we do this in a scalable way with consistent messaging to really get to managers and hourly level employees? That is really where we started to work together to develop this online course. And along with MFHA, we included other subject matter experts from both the restaurant and hospitality industry to create the training. So I'm going to talk to you today about ServSafe Workplace and particularly the Understanding Unconscious Bias course. So you may be familiar with the ServSafe brand. It is typically known for its ability to manage risks related to food safety. But the Workplace is a new suite. And ServSafe Workplace is a comprehensive suite of training programs rooted in the cultural and social issues affecting today's restaurants and hospitality environments. So this new product line focuses on mitigation and management of issues that are associated with the work and safety of employees and guests, and can assist in strengthening every establishment's stance against unfair treatment in the workplace. So the ServSafe Workplace suite equips employees and managers with training to help manage the emerging risks and advance the positive culture of the food service and hospitality industry. These programs will combine an online training that has consistent messaging on training guidance and also offers additional free resources such as break room posters and discussion guides to help reinforce key training points. So the Understanding Unconscious Bias courses come in different editions. We have a version for restaurants that is restaurant focused, and then a manager edition, and an edition for hourly employees. And on the hospitality side, we have one focused on the hospitality establishments for manager and one for hourly employees. In addition, all of these 4 programs are available in English and in Spanish. So the courses themselves are interactive training programs that address unconscious bias and the harmful impact that it has on individuals and businesses. As I mentioned, it was developed in conjunction with the MFHA and other industry professionals. And we see this as a springboard to heighten the awareness of unconscious bias and to guide restaurant and hotel employees and managers in their interactions with guests and with fellow employees. Industry stakeholders certainly agree that an online training can only touch the surface of what is needed to really appropriately address bias in the workplace. But this need for scalable training at the unit level really developed and prompted the development of this course. We're convinced that our efforts are important to establishing the awareness, beginning a pathway towards a sustainable solution. So just to tell you a little bit about the course. First and foremost, it is rooted in industry participation and centered on the challenges that are facing employees today. We've developed an interactive e-learning course. It addresses what unconscious bias is, how to uncover it, how to proactively and reactively address instances of bias, and how de-escalation practices can diminish impacts on businesses. It highlights scenario-based learning that is specific to restaurant and hotel settings, providing realistic context, and putting learners in touch with individuals' reactions to bias. And lastly, it helps employees understand the risk of a hostile work environment and to help them see their personal stake in it. So who should take the course? We have the manager edition, which would be appropriate for any supervisor or manager level employee, anyone who holds any responsibility for another employee or perceived as a leader, shift supervisor, line leads, etc. And then any hourly employee of the restaurant and hospitality industry would be appropriate to sit for the employee version. So a bit about the content of the course. The employee course is made up of 5 modules. In total, the course takes 30 minutes to complete. It does not need to be completed in one sitting, though. Anyone can stop at any point in the course and progress will be saved. And when you come back, you can pick up from that point. The introduction is a couple minutes long. The 3 main modules for the employee level is understanding unconscious bias, the impact of bias at work, and then dealing with bias, our own and others. And those modules range from about 7 to 13 minutes. And there's a knowledge check that takes about 3 minutes to complete at the end of the employee course. The manager course is comprised of 9 total modules, and then it will take a total of 60 minutes to complete that. It is made up of, firstly, the 4 employee modules, and that's really to make sure that managers understand what employees are being told and understanding what their perspective is after taking the training. In addition to the employee modules, then we have 4 modules for managers. Those range from about 5 to 7 minutes in duration. And they're focusing on the manager's perspective in dealing with unconscious bias, how to manage interactions involving guests, managing employee interactions, and then how to address crisis management and de-escalation practices. And there's a separate knowledge check for managers with questions related to the content they've learned. In addition to this, we operate a discussion guide, which is an external resource, and that is intended for managers to be using with employees after the training. It's designed to be utilized at pre-shift meetings, very brief activities. We have a media also to be associated with the activities. We've got 4 different videos. 2 are videos from the course, and 2 are additional video scenarios. The manager can either read out the scenario or play that scenario on some form of media, and then implement an activity, a quick activity with folks at their shift meeting. We also have a job aid for managers that helps with some de-escalation tips. And then we provide break room posters that you can put up around the establishment to help keep this topic in the forefront. So I want to look at just a few things that really do make the ServSafe workplace suite stand out against what we typically see as traditional training, especially in the e-learning space. When it comes to unconscious bias, the majority of training courses tend to be industry agnostic, meaning that they're placed in an office setting. And typically that means that they are focused on only the peer-to-peer interactions between employees or manager to employee. They're not always then realistic or relatable when it comes to dealing with the environment of a restaurant, food service establishment, or hotel. They tend to be a passive viewing experience with just clicks from one screen to the next. And really, without that guest piece, we're really missing the focus on social media impact and that viral nature of incidents that can happen. And then the guidance on de-escalation then is not covered as well when it comes to dealing with guest interactions. So I'm happy to say that the ServSafe workplace training really stands out in these areas because of the fact that we've been developing this just for the industry from the ground up. We have not developed a generic course and try to put a wrapper on it to make it appropriate for these industries. It's been designed by industry experts familiar with the elevated risk factors associated with unique environments for a restaurant or hotel. It includes scenarios of employee-to-guest interactions as well as employee-to-employee interactions. The course offers authentic, candid video testimonials that draw in and engage the learner. It includes knowledge checks to help reinforce the concepts. And because of the viral nature that we're aware of, the social media messaging, we have decided to depict some of the video scenarios through the use of cell phone video to really bring that message home. And lastly, crisis management and de-escalation techniques and the impacts that those can have on a business are a big piece of the course. So just to reiterate a few of the attributes about the e-learning, it is 100% digital. However, there are these discussion guides and other materials that can extend the learning beyond the course. It's offered in English and Spanish with versions for hospitality and restaurant managers and employees. And those knowledge checks really serve to help focus on the key takeaways of the course. So a little bit I wanted to mention about the approach that we took in addressing this content. Certainly, as Gerry had alluded to and mentioned, this is a topic that can be very sensitive. And so we wanted to make sure that we developed something that was going to help the learner in many ways to make sure that this content really stuck. One of the ways we do that is through guided learning, asking learners their opinions, giving them a chance to recognize their existing knowledge, and then explore answers. We've got quite a bit of video-based content delivered through testimonials and scenarios that bring real-world hospitality and restaurant situations into the learning. Sorry, I'm hearing some music in the background. Do we know what that's from? Okay, I think we're all set. I'll continue. So as I mentioned, the video-based aspect, that we have this content delivered through testimonials and video scenarios that bring real-world hospitality and restaurant situations into the learning. And again, the scenarios are tailored to the specific industry, their restaurant, food service, hotel environment. The training is focused on impact and awareness. Instead of having inauthentic depictions of inappropriate behavior occurring in that moment, we relied on first-person narratives that really talk about it after the fact and focus on the impact that that scenario may have had. And then we also include use of illustrations and infographics, animations, other on-screen learning agents. And then as well, we always make sure for accessibility that all screens are narrated, translated, and we offer a transcript as well. One comment I want to make as well about the design is that we will utilize a thoughtful approach when it comes to the color palette and the visual nature of the course. The color palette is welcoming and warm, comfortable, to help make the learner more at ease with the content that can sometimes be a sensitive topic. We use things like Polaroid-style photography and warm lighting in our video scenarios to help portray characters as people who have authentic experiences. So when it comes to implementing the training, there are some flexible options available to be able to use for your company. The preferred method would be for if you have an LMS, a learning management system, that you are able to host that course on your own learning management system. You would deliver a SCORM 1.2 compliant package. And that's ideal because you'll be able to track completions right within your organization. You're also able to purchase product keys and then assign them out as needed. Individuals can purchase single courses directly through our online site. ahlei.org will sell the hospitality version, and ServSafe.com will sell the restaurant version. And then as needed, especially when it comes to potentially offering this beyond to something like a franchisee, we have the ability to develop company portals to help really promote that out to other establishments. So individually, the price is $22 for the employee course, $30 for the manager course. However, when you start to look at a subscription level and unlimited access, licensing options, we can get down to mere dollars per user, depending on the numbers of people that will be going through the course. We also have the ability to bundle the Understanding Unconscious Bias course with our other workplace course, the Sexual Harassment Prevention. And so with that, there is the ability to get an even greater discount when you combine those two together. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and play a video for you.
Unconscious bias happens under the surface, and we don't even know that it's happening. And unfortunately, unconscious biases can cause us to treat people unfairly.
When a guest comes into one of our operations, we're welcoming them in our space. We want to deliver a great experience to all of our guests, but we can't do that if unconscious biases make our guests feel that they're unwelcome.
We work in hospitality, and by definition, that means treating people well. That includes both our guests and our coworkers.
He used a very nasty slur about my sexual orientation, and he doesn't know one thing about that. But he took one look at me and figured he knew everything he needed to know about that.
And the thing is that I'm on that video. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I am personally associated with that situation.
I pretty much hated coming to work because of them. I talked to my manager about it. She said she talked to the maintenance manager, but nothing really changed. And I ended up quitting.
It wasn't overt or anything like that, but you could tell he had issues with us, and it wasn't just about the money.
I tried to leave my own bias at the door, We've all got them, but I can't let that cloud my judgment. People depend on me.
Okay, so that video was actually a compilation of some of the clips from the actual course themselves. All those videos that you saw there are from the actual course. So just a quick view into a little bit of a sample of that online training course.
I do have some questions when you're ready here.
Go ahead, Dan.
All right, so we have, do you have any special pricing for not-for-profits? We are a hospitality and restaurant employee training organization with a social enterprise restaurant.
That's a great question. I think that as a product manager, I'm not the best to address any questions about discounts. That would be something that would definitely be addressed by our sales organization. But it's a good way to segue into making sure that you stay for the entire webinar, because if anyone wants to learn more and get access to view the course themselves, I encourage you to take the survey that's going to be available as soon as we end our question and answer session. That will allow the information and any requests and questions that you have to be directed to our sales team.
If we work in the kitchen of a hotel, would it be beneficial to do both workshops, the hospitality and the restaurant versions?
That's a great question. I would say that, and actually now that I think about it, one of our scenarios in our hotel version and does actually mention, I think, a chef. So certainly would not need to take both. The courses themselves cover the same content. The scenarios would mention maybe a line cook versus a housekeeper, or a front desk manager versus a general manager of a restaurant. So really there's not going to be enough of a difference for you to need to take both of them.
If I could add something, I think that what we've seen from working with a number of companies their unconscious bias efforts. The more you create your own scenarios, the better the application works. Because if you take the scenarios illustrated in either the restaurant version or the hotel version, you can look at that and say, okay, where else does this kind of bias occur? And is there the other way to look at it? Is it guest to guest, guest to employee, employee to guest, employee to employee? There's even employee to vendor, and vice versa. So I think as people, get a handle on the concepts and principles of what bias is, why we all have unconscious bias, what it looks like in its various forms, and how we overcome it, you're going to see other places where bias can play a role. We even had one where one of the scenarios that we used, people created bias items to connect to it that weren't even there. So I think that once you start to have your employees, your managers talk about where else do we see bias and unconscious bias playing out, you're going to find out some other areas that you can apply it as well.
How well would the content translate for non-food service and hospitality employees?
Well, certainly I think that... go ahead, Gerry.
I think, again, the principles here apply in any scenario, whether it's a restaurant where you're serving food or you're in a retail outlet where you're selling clothes. It's still the same customer interaction. It's still the same employee interaction. So I think sometimes customization to illustrate the specific industry sector can get overplayed. I think it's important to look like the industry you're trying to address, but the principles of not discriminating against somebody because of their perceived sexual orientation applies regardless of the business type. So, Maggie?
Well said, Gerry. That's basically exactly what I was going to say. So, yeah, definitely the actual content about understanding unconscious bias, what it is, how to be aware of it, that goes across multiple environments for sure.
Are these products available now?
They are available on, again, ahlei.org for hospitality versions and ServSafe.com for the restaurant version. They can be purchased there, but depending on what you want to do in terms of how you want to carry out that training, I encourage you to follow that survey and get in touch with a sales manager to help understand the best way to implement it for whoever wants to take that course.
Will there be any options for large group live trainings for food service employees on a college campus?
So I'll try to address that. We already do large group educational workshops. We haven't up to this point used the video from this training, but certainly that would be something that could easily be incorporated. But we already have been doing live workshops on unconscious bias, at least MFHA has, for several years. We've done quite a bit of work for McDonald's, Panera Bread, and a variety of others. And we've done them for groups, small groups, 30 to 40, and large groups of up to 1,000. So obviously it's better with an interactive workshop, shorter period of time, longer period of time, and with more facilitators. But we've done a lecture format for large groups as well. So college and university, perfect setting. In fact, I'm a big advocate for this kind of training being offered on the college and university campuses, because these young people, when they graduate, are going to enter the workplace. The more they know about how to engage, coach, teach, train, and develop people from different cultural, ethnic, racial backgrounds, the more effective leaders they're going to be, and the less likely they're going to make mistakes that put you, in the news, or worse yet, causes legal action.
Is there a certificate for the managers or employees who take the course?
So there is a record of completion, right? So there's a way that by taking the course, the system will track that you've completed it. There is not a certificate per se that comes out as a result. However, if you're hosting on your own LMS, you have the ability to generate a report right away that shows who has completed that course. If we are hosting via NRA or AHLEI, we have the ability to provide reports upon request.
Should this course be taken every couple of years like the ServSafe Food Safety Manager?
I would think
I will
so.
say,
To me, go ahead, Maggie.
Go ahead, Gerry. So yeah, I definitely agree
so.
that.
Maggie, go ahead.
Definitely agree that it would be super beneficial to make sure that you revisit this content. In relation to the ServSafe food safety programs, there are some times where that food code will change and there will be updates to the actual training to comply with food code. Certainly when we look at this course, we plan to update and make iterative improvements as we go along. And so what you see now, what you see in 2 years from now, it certainly may not be the same thing. So it's definitely helpful to be able to review that material and see what's new and what's relative.
And I would advocate for this type of training, just like anything else. We have customer service training all the time. We have other kinds of training that reminds us on how to upsell people. We do everything else on a regular basis. And I think this kind of training is that, A, you're going to have people who turn over. B, if you don't focus on something, you don't get better at it. And so to me, I think a requirement to have people go through this periodically is good for their retention. I think the other thing, and we're speaking with some insurance people right now about this content, and that from an insurance standpoint, if you have your employees trained, you're less likely to have an occurrence. And if it does, and you end up in court, the thinking goes that you would be less likely to you hopefully get a smaller slap on the wrist from the court for having training than if you didn't have training. So I'm a big advocate for that. It takes us many times to learn how to make an omelet. You got to practice that on a regular basis. If you don't go back to it, you're not going to be very good at it. The same is true in training. If you don't do it on a regular basis, you kind of forget some of it.
How long is the course available to use after purchase?
Let me go back into my memory. This should be something definitely for our sales manager to follow up with you on. I believe the course is available for 60 days once you redeem the code text.
I'm not sure if that was the question you were asking. Go ahead, Dan.
There's a question about prices for bundling. What are the prices?
So that's based upon the number of users, and something, again, that our sales team would be able to provide. It's a range, again, depending on whether you're looking at just corporate, if you're looking at one establishment, multiple establishments, franchisees as well. So we've got a range of options there based upon the number of users. So please fill that survey out and we can connect you.
I wanted to confirm that after you're right about 60 days after they've launched the course, they have 60 days to complete it.
Thank you.
Do we have to purchase for each employee, or can one purchase be used for the whole hotel?
The way we have your delivery of the course, it is one individual needs to purchase a separate code per user.
How would this course satisfy the California law requiring each employee to receive sexual harassment training?
So we do offer a sexual harassment prevention e-learning course. The unconscious bias might touch upon some of the same issues within the California law for harassment in general, but those are all covered within our California sexual harassment prevention product. So again, if there's a space, I'm not sure, Dan, for open comments in that survey, you could definitely indicate the need to learn more about the harassment product itself. But that product does fulfill all the California requirements.
They can just enter that right into the Q&A box here if they're interested.
Right.
How do you address holiday menu planning regarding ethnicity? For example, a soul food menu during Black History Month.
Very carefully. I'm joking. So these kinds of questions come up frequently, and I think the most sensible way is that you talk to your employees and you ask them, hey, we have a particular month recognizing a particular group or a particular event, what would be appropriate? Some people might find that kind of a menu to be stereotypical, as if all African Americans or all blacks are lovers of soul food. So I think you talk to your employees about this stuff, and you say, listen, you don't have to use stereotypical approaches to mark or celebrate particular events or holidays. I would encourage people to talk and say, listen, we want to do something. What might be a different way to think about it? Or what might be another way to think about it? Because if you find that the appetite in your environment, at your hotel, on your college campus, wherever, is one of great sensitivity to a particular topic, we probably want to stay away from it. But when people end up in social media, they get in trouble. It's almost always they didn't ask anyone, or they asked one person, just because. And again, we try to encourage people not to paint everybody with the same brush. In my disclaimer, I said not everything applies to every individual. I identify as a Black American of Cape Verdean descent. So my family's from West Africa. My wife is from Savannah, Georgia, Southern. So she grew up with a whole different collard greens and this and that. I grew up with none of that. So again, I think in all of these instances, that's sometimes where our bias to think that, this group must eat this food, this group must listen to that music, this group must do this or that, is what we want to get people in touch with. And it's just simple. Talk to people. Ask them how they feel about it. And then do what makes sense.
If I am a ServSafe proctor/instructor, could I get certified to teach this course, and will there ever be a workbook form instead of an online course?
That is a good question. I can certainly follow up. We hadn't planned that to be a time of launch, but something that we can definitely explore. If you are a proctor instructor, then I think you've got a point of contact that can route back to me so we can take a look at that option.
And I'll add that this content can be taught, because we went through training. I went through training to get certified to teach it, there's plenty of people who have great facilitator skills and are smart individuals. This stuff can be taught, and not something that we had talked about in our current relationship, but certainly something that Maggie and I will take back to our respective groups and ask about.
Will there be an update to the ServSafe Manager exam as a result of these improved bias policies?
I'm not as familiar with the ServSafe Manager course, but my understanding is that that is very focused on food safety and management, and at this point, these are treated as separate topics. The ServSafe Workplace Suite is different, again, focused on workplace culture, and the ServSafe Food Safety and Manager version don't really address these same topics.
Do you have any examples or correlations of food safety enhancements due to the awareness of unconscious bias?
These are great questions. My goodness.
Yeah, we have not explored that connection. However, though, if you have the person who asked this question, if you have some thoughts as to how those things might be connected, I'd love to hear more about it. The comments.
I am concerned about
that.
Go ahead.
I have to think a little bit more about that, but this is a very insightful question because bias plays out in many different ways. How it would impact food safety is a very interesting question.
I'm concerned about my managers having to deal with such a sensitive topic with their hourly employees, was a comment.
So I certainly hear you there. And go ahead, Gerry.
I would say that you need to be equally as concerned as if you don't. And it's the old adage of damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's hard to do it. It's hard not to do it. And I can only tell you I have talked to many companies who elected not to do this, and there's a reason they're talking to us now because they've got issues that persist. This is just part of the new normal, the new American reality. Is that talking about race, culture, ethnicity, unconscious bias, blind spots is hard. No one taught us how to do this in school. So it is difficult. The good news is that the associations, plural, lodging and restaurant, are trying to get out ahead of this thing, and that our group has had considerable experience in having these conversations. And so we've learned a lot about it, and we're looking for additional ways. This is the first way of addressing them. But again, these are the kinds of things that I would be happy to talk to anyone about. Hey, how might I, have a conversation with my manager so they feel more comfortable about this. But I don't think it's something that people can avoid. Nobody wants to end up on the nightly news because we didn't do training because it's hard. We do food safety training. It's hard. It's hard to find time. It's expensive, but it's non-negotiable. You need to do it. So I think that it's a legitimate point. I'd be happy to talk to anyone about giving some coaching and insight on how to do it better. But I have to acknowledge it's not going to be easy.
Agree, Gerry. And I would just add that through the e-learning, I think one of the benefits you have there is actually the consistency, right? So it's not about having managers addressing this on their own, going off and saying different things and dealing with it a certain way. The consistency of the e-learning allows to have, I think, something that is across different establishments. You've got some variation, obviously, in how that carries out, but there's a lot more consistency than if you didn't have a program or if you had just something that was a policy, per se.
There's a question here. Do you offer a course that speaks to the workplace environment in general? How do you manage people in different age and social groups? And are there other courses coming through ServSafe Workplace?
We certainly do plan to expand the suite beyond the sexual harassment prevention and the unconscious bias course. The next products that are lined up are undefined at the moment, but certainly a respectful workplace culture in general are some of the topics that have come up as natural next steps, diversity and inclusion, that arena. So stay tuned. We'll know more as we develop our roadmap.
Yeah, we've had requests for conflict de-escalation strategies for managers, et cetera, et cetera. So I definitely think that we have the capacity to do more. And now that we've developed one and it's of such high quality that I think there's going to be a demand for us to do more. So that's a very good question, and like all the others.
We are just about out of time. There's still a handful of questions. I'm going to put one more, and if your question wasn't answered, you can expect us to reach out to you with an answer. But this last question, how does this training improve my bottom line and dollar? Also, does this address wage discrimination?
Well, wage discrimination is a tough one for me to but I will address the other elements. If you understand how bias is coming across with customers, and you're not scaring away customers because you're unaware of what works and doesn't work, they're going to come back, they're going to be repeat customers, and that's going to go right to your bottom line. When there is racial, cultural bias, people quit the company, they quit the restaurant, and they don't usually tell you. So if you're discriminating against someone's got a bias against Muslims or people whose first language is not English, those customers leave. They don't come back. And unfortunately, they talk a lot about you in the communities and on social media, even if you may never know about it. So there's lots of ways where this goes to the bottom line. As far as the wage piece, I don't think I spent enough time thinking about that. But that's something that I would welcome a conversation on.
This is Maggie. I will add, I don't recall an actual scenario focusing on the wage issue, but I will say that when it comes to just the bottom line and what the impacts are, when something happens to a company where there is an incident and there's this viral reaction, that is when they realize how it affects the bottom line. So it's so important to get ahead of this.
Great. So that is all the time we have. I really appreciate everyone asking a bunch of really insightful, thoughtful questions. You're going to be receiving a recording of this webinar within the next 24 hours that you can review and share with your team. Like I said, if you asked a question and it wasn't answered, look forward to hearing from someone with an answer shortly. And please hang on the line for just another minute to take this last post-webinar survey. So thank you, Gerry and Maggie, for your presentation.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.